hello to all our viewers around the world to this webinar brought to you by FinTech Futures and Vertesia, titled Enterprise Strategies for Agentic AI Adoption in 2026 and Beyond. My name is Emmanuel Burns, a reporter at FinTech Futures, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. So just a quick intro, it's clear that one of the most transformative shifts happening in financial services right now is the evolution of AI beyond basic chat interactions and simple automation to the emergence of sophisticated autonomous decision-making agents. For financial institutions across the world, this technological evolution presents not only unprecedented opportunities, but also significant challenges. The question is no longer whether to adopt AI, but how to successfully scale these advanced technologies across your entire enterprise. And to find out a bit more on how organizations can navigate this space, I am joined by three superb experts. So before we get going, I think it'd be great to find out a bit more about them. Perhaps let's start with you, Tim. Could you let us know a bit more about your role and your career so far?
Certainly. Thank you very much, Cameron. So my name is Tim Hood. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where everyone is in the world and when they listen to this. And I am the Senior Vice President for EMEA at Vertesia. I bring about 25 years enterprise software experience and took the plunge to join the world of pure AI earlier this year when I joined my new colleagues at Vertesia.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And Mark, please.
Yes, good day, everyone. My name is Mark Totten. I'm a director at the U.S. Wealth Solutions team here at First Eagle Investments. We are a privately owned asset manager, roughly 180 billion in AUM. I'm the head of our sales and distribution desk here in Midtown Manhattan, New York City. Happy to be here. Thanks, Cameron.
Super. And finally, Michael.
Hi, everyone. Michael Finkelstein here. I bring over 20 years of strategic operations and transformation leadership across financial services. I come to the AI conversation as an operator focused on practical adoption and governance. I've led major transformation efforts at Mercury Financial, Chubb, and several Fortune 100 companies, and hold an MBA from NYU and economics degree from Wharton. Looking forward to today.
Super, thank you everyone. As you can tell, we have a stellar lineup today, but okay, let's get going. I think I should remind everyone that please do send in a lot of questions. How this is going to work, this panel it's going to be about 40-45 minutes of panel discussion, and then we'll try and answer as many questions that are sent in a Q&A section. But yes, please get them in. I'll ask a couple other times, and yeah, our panel will be looking forward to answering some of them. Let's start with the first one, and perhaps Tim, can you go for this first question? And that is, what distinguishes agentic AI from traditional AI, and why is this shift critical for financial services competitiveness?
Yeah, certainly. Thanks, Cameron. I'm happy to kick things off. Firstly, I think it's interesting that we're already talking about traditional AI, when just a few years ago, AI wasn't something that was a really commonly known technology in the wider world. In fact, I mean, ChatGPT, which is where a lot of people learn about AI and artificial intelligence, only had its third birthday at the end of November last month. So I think it's really, really interesting that the AI has become a ubiquitous discussion point already. I also think it's incredible. I've mentioned I've been working enterprise software for more than 25 years. And the pace of change from what's a traditional deterministic automation software that many of us are familiar with to working with AI has been fascinating to see, because it's really a different type of software. It's almost like software, but not as we know it. It's certainly the first technology software that I've ever had a conversation with and said, what are you, why do you do what you do, and how do you behave? So I think AI overall it's fascinating that we're calling that traditional. And I think that familiarity with tools like ChatGPT and Copilot is what we are seeing with traditional AI, which is really a sort of a productivity assistant. You can ask questions, you can give it certain tasks, but it needs a lot of help along the way. You're guiding and determining how it behaves and what it does. Whereas agentic AI is really focused around allowing agents to autonomously work to deliver business outcomes, act independently, and to a degree, I think there's a lot more to come, but to a degree to do some reasoning to work out how they're going to achieve that task. And I think that Jensen Huang from NVIDIA summed it up really well when he said that AI isn't a tool, AI is work, and that's the profound difference. And I'm sure that Mark and Michael will talk more about this as well. But it's also, I think, with agentic AI, doing that work for organizations, there's a lot of questions around governance, around which decisions should and shouldn't be taken, around where human in the loop is still incredibly important, especially in highly regulated industries like financial services, and bearing in mind things like the EU AI Act. But that's really the biggest difference. It's agents to do work for you rather than helping you with productivity, through your daily working day. And then why is that important for financial services organizations and competitiveness, but also the wider business world? Well, as you mentioned, it's not really a question of if you're going to deploy AI as an organization now in a business. It's a question of when, how, and to achieve what. So I think there's definitely a need to remain competitive in the industry and field. Also, to help organizations scale more quickly, if you can do a lot of those manual tasks more effectively, it allows business people to focus more on the higher value output tasks for them and their customers. And there is obviously some conversation about, will it have an impact on white collar workers? But I think it's also important to try and think differently. I think, what else will AI allow organizations to do and services to provide to their customers? Because it does open up a wider range of possibilities to provide services that simply you couldn't do before because of restrictions around manpower and the ability to process large amounts of content and information. So I think that's really, really important to focus on. So hopefully, Cameron, that gave you a quick outline of what the differences are as far as I see them. And there's a lot of debate about what's agentic and what's autonomous and what's AI in the industry generally, and also why it's important for organizations to focus on what can be done now, but also what can be done in the future. And the core thought should be, how do you deliver better outcomes for your customers? Because if you start with that premise, I think it puts you in a good place when you're considering how to use any technology, and even more so with AI.
Super. Well, thank you so much, Tim. Yep, you've really set the scene well there. But let's get on to some of the juicy bits here, some of the use cases. And that is, I'd be really keen to find out which agentic use cases in financial services are currently delivering the highest return of investment and the fastest user adoption rates. Mark, could you tackle this one first, please?
Yeah, great. So there are three that we have rolled out in 2025 that have brought the highest ROI, the fastest user adoption rates. One of them being ChatGPT 5.0 Enterprise. We rolled that out to the team. We now have across the firm 250 total users using it. We broke it out and rolled it out by department, and we're going to continue to. That has saved hours and hours of manual work for mostly for our sales and distribution team, the analysts and associates for sure. That has been they have the highest usage of the function, and so that's been incredible for that team. We do have an AI chatbot functionality. We call it our First Eagle RAG. That's an acronym for Retrieval Augmented Generation. So if you were to think, if you follow the Iron Man movies, this is our Jarvis, almost. So that is beginning to roll out with several teams now. That's probably the most agentic part of the AI that we are using at this point. And we also have some AI sales enablement tools. So before we go into a client or prospect meeting, we will have the AI pull all necessary information we need for that prep. Then the meeting is had, we record the meeting, and then on the back end, it actually suggests and the proper follow-up and how we're going to continue in the sales process. So those three have really changed our processes in a very good way here at First Eagle.
Super, thank you. And Michael?
Yeah, building off that, first I'd say in the aggregate, where you see potential for the fastest ROI is functions where people are drowning in repetitive work. So, for example, fraud operations teams, for example, often deal with large numbers of alerts that must be triaged, documented, escalated. Operations agents can monitor alerts, compile evidence, and prepare draft-ready reports. On the customer support side, you see fast adoption specifically because agents don't really replace advisors. Instead, they remove what you could think of as like the swivel chair work, searching for answers, drafting responses, or pulling policy language. In all these cases, the key is that agents can succeed quickly because they start with human in the loop oversight, building trust well before we would talk about any kind of full autonomy. And the last comment I would just make is, we often think of ROI requiring deep integration. In reality, some of the biggest wins come simply from agents gathering and summarizing data, much like Mark just said, faster than any person could. And that's where we see the wins.
It's great to hear about real world applications. I have a question about measuring success. I mean, you both made comments about speeding things up, where to focus, and how to make some of those assessments about good use cases. But given that AI is so new to many organizations, how did you define what success looks like, and how are you measuring that success? Is it, are the traditional KPIs that you're looking at, or are you looking at it a different way because it's a different technology?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. So we have basically 5 pillars that we measure and quantify as success. One of them is enterprise impact. So what is the actual, initiative bringing to our strategic business value? The second one is to unlock capacity. We truly want to empower the employees. We are at the very firm belief that AI is at this point not going to replace people, but people that use AI will replace people that are not using it. So we are really truly looking to empower our current staff. So we look at that as a measure of success. We have to innovate responsibly. I'm on the AI Innovation Council here at First Eagle. We created this in order to make sure that we had, strategic guidelines. We also have an AI Governance Council that we, have to run compliance-wise and a lot of things by, in terms of getting things to get scalable or bring it to the not just pilot phase. So these are the ways that we're measuring it, and then we go on road shows to our different departments, and we say, okay, here's the trial period. What can we tweak before we go fully live? So we like to call them our mini road shows, that we go through different departments with their different tools that they're using, and so that's how we're measuring and kind of keeping ourselves held accountable, if you will.
And Tim, if I could add something to what Mark said, I think even though maybe the technology is new, the way we measure success really isn't. We're looking at the same business outcomes we always cared about. Our cycle time's faster, our backlog shrinking, our employees spending more time on judgment and less on paperwork, effectively. So, AI is new maybe, but measuring the business impact really is not.
Well, great. Thank you both for that, and great question, Tim. Actually, staying with you, Michael, I have a question. Do you have any examples differentiating between front office, so like client advisory, and also back office, so operations reporting, when we're talking about use cases?
Well, from a back office standpoint in particular, I mentioned this earlier, fraud teams can use agents to collect evidence, analyze transaction patterns, prepare case summaries. Compliance back office definitely can leverage co-pilots to read regulatory updates, compare them to existing policy, draft revisions with really full traceability. I think the way we're thinking of it is, in the front office, AI can often feel like a personal assistant, and in the back office, it feels more like a process partner to the people doing the work.
Brilliant. And so another important one is, how can organizations identify and then prioritize these high value return of investment driving use cases? Mark, I know you've got an answer for this one.
Yeah, so we do have our Innovation Council. We meet quarterly, and so these are the heads of many departments where this is going to affect. We make our use cases, or we make our case to launch for full use cases. Our AI Governance Committee joins these meetings. We decide from here, where do we want to spend the time and really our resources towards which projects are going to bring the most ROI to the firm. At the end of the day, this is also, as well as a productivity, it's also a cost benefit analysis that we have to look over. So we are really trying to, like Michael said, we're trying to remove these processes a way that can be automated, that can just save so much time, so much manpower, and move on to the more productive and in the sales capacity, client-facing type more interactions that are going to drive productivity, sales, revenue, so on and so forth. And so the two buckets that we really are focusing on are how are we automating, and then how can we use the agentic AI for our problem solving to make us more productive.
If I could add on something, Cameron, in terms of prioritizing, our observations are really to target processes where there's you can see it very clearly. There's high manual load, there's high backlog risk, and predictable decision rules exist. So again, starting with workflows where human in the loop oversight already exists, and then looking for multi-step workflows, not single tasks. This is where agents really can shine. So, if you're pulling customer information, validating completeness, generating a summary, anything has multiple tasks rather than single tasks is where you really see the differentiation. And, just generally, the way to think about it is if a workflow crosses several systems and spreadsheets, great news, that's where agents perform really well.
Amazing, thank you. Well, just quickly, I just wanted to say to those watching, thank you so much. I can already see questions flooding in, but keep them coming. Keep putting them in the attendee chat. Our team behind the scenes, our producers are looking out for them, and I promise we'll try and get to as many as possible at the end. But yes, keep them coming in. They're great so far. But moving on to this really important what steps should senior IT leaders take to prepare their data, their infrastructure, and institutional knowledge bases to maximize agentic AI effectiveness? Tim, I'll bring you in on this one, please.
I think Mark and Michael have already made some really interesting comments about some of the steps that kind of lead up to looking at where which processes can most benefit from AI. And I think it's also interesting that Michael talked about the fact that the technology has changed, but some of the some of the way that you measure the outcomes hasn't changed. And I think to a degree, there's some of that true when you're looking at preparing data infrastructure and so forth. I mean, first of all, you need a structured content pipeline. The models, the LLMs, the large language models that a lot of this depends upon, they depend on getting clean, usable inputs. Garbage in, garbage out is something I've heard for 25 years, and that's just as true with AI projects as it is with any other project. I think one area to look at which is a bit different is enterprise orchestration, looking at how you manage multi-agents and workflows across and enforcing permissions across the business, because you're using a lot of the time you're using your enterprise content to fuel the AI output. So it's important that you're considering what tasks are the agents performing, and therefore what content should they have access to, and which if the person was doing that job, what would they have access to, and how would they look at the task in hand. Governance and observability, kind of building on that, is incredibly important. There's a lot of AI can seem like a black box at times, and it's really important to have that end-to-end observability and auditability to make sure that you can really understand the process. And also, if you get asked by a regulator or as part of something like the EU AI Act to show what happened, you absolutely can do. And also integration into other core systems, be that customer relationship management, enterprise resource planning, HR, platform integrations, ensuring that AI is augmenting existing workflows rather than creating new data silos, I think is incredibly important. And I think there's a difference in the way sometimes these need to be considered, but there are a lot of the same points of consideration that IT leaders need to look at. And these kind of lead on to what's the best deployment option for you? Is it to build your own? Is it to look at a platform that allows multiple agents to be managed from a central point? Is it to look at point solutions? So you've got to look at what's the best way of implementing the solutions based upon your organization, your level of IT skill, and what you're looking to achieve. And then I think the institutional knowledge was interesting, the road shows, or the mini road shows that were mentioned, because AI does behave differently, and understanding how AI behaves, and sometimes to a degree why it behaves that way, is very important to look at the outputs. And I think the final point that I'd make on this, Cameron, is don't be afraid to experiment and fail fast if needed. It was great to hear about some of these assessment points of how Mark and Michael are looking to implement AI applications. But part of it is a degree of experimentation, because I don't, the technology is evolving so quickly. It is a relatively new technology in the space. So I think being able to experiment, go from pilot to production quickly if needed, again, because of the pace of change generally with the technology, those are all the sort of things I would consider if I was rolling out an IT project. And they're some of the things that we talk a lot to our customers about.
Brilliant. Some really helpful tips there. How do you measure success and determine readiness when moving from pilot to full-scale agentic AI deployment? Mark, are you okay to tackle this one?
Yeah. So we bring our 5-pillar approach in. We really talk about what business vertical is going to be able to, number one, adopt it the quickest, and as well make it the most effective. So our committee, like I said, we meet quarterly formally, but we very informally meet on a weekly basis. We're checking in with our teams, and we need to make sure that before we go full scale, that it's something that we have invested the right time in. We've had the right people in place. We're making the proper tweaks, and so we just follow that 5-pillar process, and it's been successful so far. So it's been great.
Super. And so how can organizations effectively manage cultural resistance and stakeholder concerns during the agentic AI implementation? Michael?
Yeah, so I think the key here is going back to basics, treating AI as business transformation, not a technology project, which is not unusual in terms of an approach, but it's just reinforcing that idea. This is not a tech rollout. This is a transformation on how work gets done. And for sure, you have to start with trusted co-pilots to build familiarity. So early wins that can show AI drafting and summarizing and pre-filling and collecting, but where humans and the employees are still deciding, those are the quick wins. You definitely can't force adoption. So you have to earn it by showing small, safe wins. And while there's this general concern that people worry that AI will replace them, the truth is AI more likely will replace parts of their jobs they actually dislike to begin with.
Okay, great. And Mark?
Yeah, no, I can add to this for sure, please. So, I mean, cultural resistance, with any company can be challenging. Of course, as we may all know, we've started with our largest early adopters, which for us at our firm are the analysts and associates that do have a lot of manual work to be done. As we said, we go on these road shows to the departments, and we say, look, this is how this AI is to be benefit you, and this is how many hours it is going to help you, take this task and get it completed. Once they see it in real time, and once they hear from their peers that it's working, that it saved me X amount of hours in a day, they are pretty quick to adopt it. So I'll say once they see the real time use case, that's when the light goes off, the light bulb goes on, and they say, okay, let me give this a go. And then they come back with questions, and we love questions. We say, please, when we're rolling out with new capabilities, come back with any question possible that you have. If you're thinking that this is a question, your colleague is probably thinking the same question. So we have a continuous feedback loop, and people have been very comfortable coming to us with these questions, and that's when we get that interaction and that engagement, that's when the cultural resistance kind of starts easing, and then of course you hear just around the water cooler, hey, so XYZ is working, and then a department will come to you saying, hey, is this capability even going to be rolled out to my team? If it is, when can we start training? So once you get that snowball kind of going downhill, it builds pretty quickly, and it's very effective.
Awesome, thank you. Well, I'm actually going to stick with you here, Mark, if that's okay, and ask you, what partnerships or vendor relationships are critical for successful agentic AI implementation?
Yes, vendor relationships. So we've met with hundreds, not joking, hundreds of vendors regarding their capabilities, their tools, so on and so forth. I was speaking with our CTO last week, and he was kind of joking, saying, "Oh yeah, the old school is SQL and so on and so forth." That's what everyone always just defaulted to and used, and new school is if I were to name some vendors, Snowflake, AWS, Google, Workspace, so on and so forth, because to aggregate and consolidate all of your data in a large cloud, that's kind of 101 for us. And once you have all of that centralized, then what we do is we do bring in other vendors and we plug in their LLMs. And so that enhances our capabilities, and our CTO, he refers to it as these are his Lego building blocks. So that's how we treat vendor relationships. We have many of them. We are still so very much in the early innings. We don't see a clear market leader at this point. So we are working with several and we've seen so many demos. But yeah, we're going to continue to work with several and see as the game goes on, who's leading the pack. So that's how we kind of take our vendor relationships very much to heart.
I think the early in the innings comment it's a little bit of a translation across the pond. It's slightly different over here, but I think that resonates a lot, Mark, because it isn't, it's not an area where there is a defined market leader for the various different parts. And I think a lot of it's about working with people who've got experience of real world deployments, who can talk about customer experiences and not just technology and ideas. And also looking at agility, that bit, the technology is changing so fast. I think it's vital to work with agile companies, best of class, who can demonstrate the value they can add in a particular area, and be adaptable, because I have no doubt the market in 6 months, a year, 2 years is going to look very different to it does now. So we are indeed early in the innings, or at the start of the game in some way.
Great point there. And again, Mark, if you wouldn't mind leading us off with this one, and that is, how should financial services firms approach risk management and compliance when deploying their autonomous AI decision-making systems?
So this one, I'll start off by saying we are not at the stage yet where we have autonomous decision-making by the Agentic AI. Because of some governing bodies, the SEC, so on and so forth, we do not have, no AI chatbot is used to make an investment decision yet. Client interactions, or decision making at the firm, we still have a human element to every decision that's made, but they are very much now a part of that process to get to that decision. But because of like I said, some governance and some compliance, we're still working that out in the industry. But for right now, we're not there yet with autonomous decision making, but we are, it's well a part of our process, which is great. I'm not sure if Michael feels different.
Yeah, nothing more to add right now. Thanks.
Tim, anything there on risk management?
I think I would definitely defer to Mark on the real world experience of risk management. Again, I think some of it comes down to making sure you've got the boxes ticked. You've got access control, auditability, observability. And again, it was interesting for me looking at the different legislation that's in different states in the US, what the UK is doing versus the EU. And I think it is, I think it's still a way off before we want AI making unaided decisions about investments or insurance and that area there. So I think it's very much making sure that you've got the kind of the end-to-end, be it infrastructure, platform, or capability if you're building your own solution. As long as you've got that end-to-end visibility, auditability, and observability, I think you're in good shape. Because again, I think the legislation and the regulation will change in the coming years.
Great, thank you. Well, okay. Important one here. So when you're building out your AI solutions, a lot of organizations find they don't know what they don't know. Looking back in hindsight, being 2020, is there anything you would do differently when it comes to AI implementation at your organization? And Michael, let's bring you back in on this one.
Yeah, by far, and this comes back to the lens in which I bring this as an operator, the biggest lesson by far is operational alignment matters more than technical readiness. The technology is there. This is purely about operational alignment. So bringing ops, IT, risk, compliance, and legal together at the ideation stage, not halfway through, is really clear, is really key rather. And as I mentioned before, starting with smaller, safer co-pilots to build that trust, you learn very quickly that aligning stakeholders early isn't a nice to have. It's really the accelerator for the process completely.
Great. And could I maybe also ask Tim, would you like to add anything onto this one about hindsight and what you might do differently?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, in the time that I've been at Vertesia, the market's changed, the technology has changed so quickly. I mean, and I wish I knew what I didn't know about 6 months ago. And I think, we speak to a lot of organizations where they've started down a particular route, and because of the newness of the technology and the fact that it isn't, an ERP implementation, something like an SAP or an Oracle Financials, there's probably 15, 20, 30,000 implementations that people have worked on and experienced. That simply isn't the case with AI. So a lot of organizations are finding they're starting down a particular route, and then because they hadn't done this before, they're simply having to learn as they go along. And I think sometimes that's why it's great to work with system integrators. Sometimes it's great to work with platform providers. But I think not being afraid to fail quickly and learning from that can only help in the process, Cameron, of rolling things out effectively. And again, making sure that you're agile and you can pivot as needed and keeping up with what's changing from a technology perspective.
Super, thank you. Well, we're almost getting to the end of our panel discussion. So again, I'll ask you, everyone watching from around the world, please get in some questions for this panel. Like I say, we've got a number that we've got to get through anyway, but this is my last call out for questions to come in. Okay, so I'd like to actually hear from all of you on this one because, well, it's quite a big topic, this. So looking ahead to next year as Christmas is coming up, and also but beyond 2026, what emerging trends in agentic AI should financial services leaders be preparing for today? Michael, can you lead us off on this?
Yeah, so I think it's becoming really clear that co-pilots that today perform one step in the process, likely 24, 36 months from now, are going to be fully autonomous agents that execute end-to-end workflows. So we have to start to imagine a near future where AI won't just assist people, but will really collaborate with them. And the other comment I'll just make is on the regulatory side, I do think regulators are moving quickly. The clarity they provide may very well have to accelerate adoption, not slow it down.
Super, thank you. Tim?
Oh, sorry, I needed to use my real intelligence to press the unmute button as opposed to relying on artificial intelligence to guess when I'm going to speak. It also proves I'm real. I'm not an AI avatar. So I think that if we look into 2026, AI is moving so fast that it's difficult to predict what's going to be the next most exciting change in artificial intelligence. We see what with the LLMs coming out, the new Gemini engine coming out seems to have got great feedback, great results. I think the LLMs will continue to evolve at pace, and it will continue to be an arms race between the larger, the large hyperscalers to deliver the best LLM. I think what's important is the infrastructure, the support around that, so that you can effectively consume the LLMs. Some of the things that we talked about. So I think laying the groundwork, now is key. And I like the phrase, AI moving from a helper to being an operator, and again, freeing people up from more routine paperwork to higher value judgment decisions. And I think part of that, AI needs to do better at reasoning, to complete true agentic tasks. It's not, you need a degree of reasoning to verify, gather additional data, compare and contrast different data points, to be able to then more naturally mimic natural autonomous functions and behavior to prepare and perform work the same way that individuals do at the moment. So I think seeing that ability to to really reach the next level of being a co-worker, rather than that sort of that assistant and further development on the agentic AI. And also, who knows what other fantastic things are going to come up in the next year and beyond. But let's hope it's a force of good as opposed to some of the less positive feedback that you see on some of the potential.
Super. And finally, for this part, Mark, any predictions for 2026 and beyond?
Oof, our crystal ball is foggy at best, but we do think that the more that we are using these tools, the more proprietary data that these chatbots and LLMs that they are going to receive, the better their suggestions are going to be going forward. The better they get to know the firm and how we operate, the better that the outcomes that are coming out are going to be. So again, we are just at the start of the game or the match. We definitely want to continue on this path because it's working. But I would say in 2026, we're only going to see sharper and I would say more accurate or more productive use cases, and that's going to continue to help our team and to shave hours off of some manual labor, which is great.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Well, I'm conscious of time, and like I say, we've had a load of questions come in here. So I'm going to jump into going through the big list of them. And as I say, keep them coming in, people, because these our experts here are ready to answer them. Let's go with Janelle. So Janelle asks, fintechs lose millions due to bot-driven fraud and ATOs, but users hate friction. How do you see AI helping companies strike the balance between strong risk controls and a smooth onboarding transaction experience? And if I go to Michael on this one.
Yeah, so I think about this as the guardrails. It's a good question. AI actually helps tighten controls while reducing friction. So, it applies rules the same way every time. It can check more data faster than any human. So instead of slowing the process down, really it removes manual steps that create friction, while the guardrails that are there ensure nothing slips through. That being said, the balance still comes from keeping humans in the escalation path. So think of AI handling the routine risk checks instantly, but when something requires judgment, it does escalate. And this means that lower risk transactions can flow smoothly, higher risk ones get more human attention, not less.
Awesome, thank you. And I thank Mandeep for this because he sent this in right at the beginning of the episode, so he's been very patient. He asks, should enterprises build agentic AI systems entirely from scratch or embed within existing code bases and workflows? What are the cost, risk, and scalability implication of each approach, and how to frame long-term AI strategy? I think, Tim, you're the best to answer this one.
That's a big question. I mean, it's basically saying, what should our AI strategy be? And that's going to vary depending on the size of your organization, what you're looking to achieve, your technology maturity, whether you're regulated, how regulated you are, your geography, and so on. And there isn't one single answer, because if there was one single answer, then we would have a dominant force in the market. I think we've worked with customers who've gone down the build your own route. And as we mentioned earlier on, there's the you don't know what you don't know. And again, I'll make a comparison with systems like ERP, CRM, line of business systems for core banking, financial services, and insurance systems. And people also tried building their own at the start of that. Those phases of technology, but that can often lead to complications. You're maintaining a lot of your own custom code. Sometimes that works because you're a large organization and you've got the IT capability, but it can also slow down on the agility front. I have something of a vested interest because Vertesia provides a platform that allows organizations to roll out more simply, quickly, and more securely. And we found that can speed up deployment and also help put some of the guardrails around some of the topics that we mentioned around auditability, connectivity, and observability. But I think really it's about finding the right solution for your organization, depending on your size and what you're looking to achieve. And looking at cost-benefit analysis, to Michael's earlier point, there's the technology's changed, but some of the approaches haven't. So, okay, what's the benefit of doing it this way, that way, or that way? And then what's the improved output, and sort of making that same value decision about which route to go down. But I think we will see, we'll see some consolidation in the market, and I think help some of the sort of the smaller organizations who've tried to build their own run into a lot of those issues very early on. So I think there's some things to learn there, Cameron.
Brilliant, thank you. Well, I've got a couple questions in on data. So, Michael, if you wouldn't mind having a go at these ones. So first off, JY says, this all goes back to having good data to start agentic AI. How are you getting folks to enter information into the system and how do we decide what is good data or not? And then I'll have another one, but I will go to it after you've answered JY.
Yeah, sure. No, I'm excited to answer this question. Good data, first of all, anything that's accurate, current, consistently structured enough for an AI agent to use without guesswork. Now, that being said, this goes back to kind of the basics. If a human analyst struggles with the quality of the data today, the AI will too. So we have to start with the sources that are already trusted in our existing processes. And we don't, I think the thing is not to ask so much if the data is perfect, but ask if it's fit for the decision the agent needs to make. So, if the workflow is deterministic, if the data supports those decisions reliably, it's good enough to start. And so definition of good data, I think, can be rooted in this question of tied to the intended outcome is the way we look at it.
I think if I can add something there, Cameron, I talked about content as being the fuel that powers the large language models and the LLMs. So I think a lot of organizations don't always look in as much detail as they should about how they prep that content so that the models can consume it effectively. And there are some good examples that if you think of let's use an annual report for a large organization, it's going to have a lot of embedded charts, graphs, which has key numbers in it. There's going to be a lot of visual elements to the documents and the content as well. And it's important to be able to get that into a format that can be easily consumed and effectively consumed by the LLMs to make sure that they can generate accurate outputs. And I come from a content management background, and I think people sometimes overlook if you've got millions, hundreds of millions, or even billions of documents that you want to use AI on, you need to make sure they're effectively prepared to be consumed, and that's something that we have a lot of focus on because, as I mentioned, garbage in, garbage out. If you can't feed the models effectively, you're not going to get contextually accurate and usable output.
Nice. Well, I said there was a second question on data, so here we go. The question says, are there any thoughts on how should the firms use external data to build their own agentic AI capability? With privacy and data a big regulatory issue, how will it be possible to get this external data to train the AI agents? Is there anyone who can...
Yeah, look, I'll weigh in on, Cameron, I'll weigh in that really quickly, just briefly. I guess what I would say is think of it as, external data should only be used inside a permissioned context. So policy first, data second means the right order is you've got your policy and risk controls, then you've got your data, then the agent. So the agent shouldn't see anything the human in that role wouldn't be allowed to see effectively. So it's really about setting your permission context first and then deciding what external data can actually be brought in.
Yeah, I can also piggyback on this. So we, have partners that give us all sorts of third-party data. These agreements are that it stays in-house, only for internal use only, so on and so forth. So we were already doing that manually. Now we are just using, agentic AI within our ecosystem. So the data is not really moving to anywhere that it already was not through humans. And so because we have these in-house tools, because we have built it from kind of the ground up, that agreement still stands that we, compliance-wise, so on and so forth, can still use the data that we are purchasing or that we are given, and it's not in a context that data will get outside of the firm or in the wrong hands, so on and so forth. So our governance team has said, yeah, we can be using that external data because we would be using it anyways.
Yeah, I think it's almost philosophical question, which has come up with the LLMs and how they were trained originally as well. And I don't think anyone on this call is going to have the final answer. And I think again it will continue to evolve. I think the comments from Michael and Mark are really on point. That if a human would have had access to that data to use in a certain way, then it's perfectly reasonable that an AI tool can have access to data to use in the same way to complete the same task. I think perhaps the bigger question is, with the ability to look at huge volumes of data from websites and books, music. That's a much deeper philosophical question on how's an economy going to run, and how do we reward people for generating the original content? Because AI can generate new content, but it's only based on the content that's gone before to some degree. So I think that's a much bigger philosophical question when it comes to the wider question. But I think Michael and Mark provided great answers about how to consider to use that data in for financial services organizations in the tasks that they're doing today.
Brilliant, thank you guys. Well, so Saffron has asked a couple of questions actually, and the first one that I'd like to pose to you guys is, how do you empower your employees? So is that whether that's training and how are you building that into your agentic strategy / rollout?
Yeah, so let me take this on, Cameron. What I would start with is just the idea for first just treating your employees as the professionals that they are. They can see what's happening in the landscape. So empowering them is really about giving them two things. One is confidence through clear guardrails and human in the loop oversight, which I can't emphasize enough. And then the second is capability through co-pilots that remove repetitive work so they can focus on judgment. So our experience is when people feel safe and supported, they lean into the technology instead of resisting it.
Awesome. Some more thoughts on how to empower the workers to embrace agentic AI?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in as well. So we first say training, and it's not just a large scale training where everybody is not interacting and it's not very engaging if you're rolling out a training session for your entire firm at the exact same time. So we do go about it department by department, and we have experts in that department that have already been piloting whatever capability that we are about to roll out, so that they can kind of be the team lead for that function. So they already have someone on their team that's using it, that's a power user. They can ask them questions. They don't have to go above and ask other departments and take time out of their day. So that's how we are empowering people. Is first we're getting the leaders through each department. After that, we are making sure that they are available for any tweaks, Q&A, feedback, so on and so forth, so that each team feels very comfortable coming to somebody for assistance, for guidance, so on and so forth. So we really take the approach of do it small bit, piece by piece, to kind of get your teams comfortable, and that will empower them to have a voice in it. And once they have a voice in it, then they're invested in it. So that's how we truly like to roll out, and we feel it empowers teams.
I couldn't agree more with something that Mark said there towards the end. People have got to feel involved and engaged. Whenever you turn on the radio, watch the TV, read a newspaper, you can't go 15 seconds without hearing about AI. And some of the stories are really positive, and some of the stories can be a lot less positive. And it can make people feel uncomfortable, because if you don't understand something and it's new, it can be uncomfortable. So I think having the conversation to explain what an organization is looking to do with AI and why, and allowing the employees to be part of that conversation and to be engaged in where do you think this could be used, how do you think this could be used, I think that's really, really important. And I think also having champions who've gone through an AI project and been successful and seen the benefits. It's the same again. Some of the same philosophies that you'd use in typical IT projects. Having the champions to answer questions, get people comfortable, whenever you introduce a new technology, whatever form of automation it is, I started my career with optical character recognition far too long ago that I wish to remember. And that concerned people because everyone suddenly was like, oh my goodness, well, I have a job because a lot of my job is, looking at invoice data, and people still have jobs. But I think that overcoming some of those fears and anxiety and making sure people feel engaged, I think that's really, really important. The same as you would for any IT project, Cameron.
Super, thank you guys. And again, just before I ask Saffron's second question, we've got just under 10 minutes left of the session. So please, if anyone has some last minute questions they want to ask the panel, now is the time to get them in. But okay, let's tackle Saffron's second question. And that is, what have you seen or experienced are the largest security risks for FS rolling out Agentic? Bit of a tough one. Maybe you don't all have something to add here, but perhaps Mark or Tim, anyone have something to add here?
Mark, I'm happy to try and kick it off unless you want to.
Yeah, sure. So the biggest security risk, I'm trying to think, being that we're an asset manager, obviously the biggest security risk is through our investment decisions and using the AI to get to those decisions and having that data for whatever reason be breached or so on and so forth. We have not had that issue yet, but that's something that our CTO is very, very, the cybersecurity of everything is that training has gone way up, I would say, in the past 2 years for the group. So we just continue to try to be at the forefront of that. But we do know, our governance team, their council has talked about the biggest risks. That is another reason why we are not there in terms of the automated decision making yet, because of the risk management. We are trying to attack this on a very conservative type platform and in a process. But that's for, we know all the risks that are ahead that could possibly, we're just trying to get in front of it. That's the best we can do, and we again go through our 5-pillar process to make sure that we are measuring that and that these risks are being mitigated.
I think you make a really good point on the decision-making stuff, Mark, that, there's AI, human in the loop is still so important to take decisions that impact people's, finances and in the financial services sector particularly, and obviously their life is a part of that. And I think that's also why the observability is so important, to make sure that you can track what AI is doing and then dig into why and how it's doing it, if needed. But also, I think, wherever people are using artificial intelligence, you've got to look at the input points, the same as you would with any corporate IT solution. You've got to look at the input points of what's coming in, and that's where your greatest vulnerability always is, because if you can front engineer security breaches, that's what malicious people are looking to do. So look at the entry point, and then I think also make sure, until you're so confident in the ability of any decision it's going to take, based upon regulatory restrictions as well, make sure you're keeping that human in the loop.
Awesome. Well, Tim, if you stay with me, we've had a follow-up to your answer on, I believe it was the question around empowering your workforce, and it's from Mandeep, and he says a follow-up to Tim. Amazon, Google, Microsoft have laid off people. So how do you convince employees that it will not happen to them?
It's a great question, and I think there's a degree of interpretation here. I've worked in IT for, like I mentioned, more years than I care to remember, and unfortunately, I've seen companies make layoffs more times than I care to remember. This isn't the first time that large organizations have made layoffs. I remain unconvinced that all of the layoffs that have been made in the name of AI are down to AI. I think part of it is a corporate process that requires companies to make hit certain financial targets. And I think sometimes when people have been laid off, which is unfortunate, and I'm not pretending for a second that AI isn't going to have some impacts there, but that sometimes those layoffs are called AI when in fact it's a corporate process that's happened before and unfortunately will happen again. And I don't think you can ever convince someone that you're never going to get laid off. It's a difficult thing to do. I think the thing I'd encourage is AI is not going away. I don't think anybody on this call or more widely would suggest that in 5 years people will say, oh, that was a fad, it didn't work out. So I think we've got to prepare, make sure there's appropriate governance around how AI is used and the way it's used. But I think we have to embrace the technology because it's not something that's going to disappear in a few years. Cameron?
Amazing, thank you. Well, okay, so Kavita asks, any thoughts on using AI to determine company-specific tailored use cases and associated benefits / return on investment, as we spoke about a bit earlier, to deploy agents to yield those benefits? Michael, would you mind having a crack at this?
Yeah, thanks. This is what I would say, that around company-specific use cases, I think it's about having just a few key building blocks. The key is to start with the outcome, not the AI. So the first is identify the specific business problems you're trying to solve. And from there, you want to create a knowledge layer where you've got policies and procedures and document structure for AI. You need an orchestration layer where the agent can call systems, retrieve data, and perform actions. And then you definitely need to have a governance layer for oversight, auditability, and escalation. So, but when you're talking about company specific, you have to start with the outcomes that you're trying to solve, not try to start with the AI itself. So it's always about starting with the business problems themselves.
Super. Very important one here. How do you prevent AI being contaminated by hacking / spot if done? So is probably a wide old question here, but how do you prevent it from being contaminated?
I think it's a question of what contaminated means. I think AI is only ever, well, LLMs in particular. Let's talk specifically about LLMs. They're only going to be as good as the data that they're trained on. So I think it's important that there's control, governance, transparency on some of that. Because if you train an LLM on bad data or biased data, you're going to get bad or biased outputs. I think you talk about contaminated by hacking. I have seen cases where people are trying to some of the chatbots that you see, which are designed to help answer questions on some sites. I have seen people trying to inject prompts to understand what's going on in the background there to then find security breaches for them. But that's the same again as any traditional entry point. And I think that yes, it's a huge concern. But it's a huge concern when you have any IT deployment at scale. And we've seen in the UK some tough cases this year in particular about organizations being hacked, which have nothing to do with AI. So yes, AI introduces another entry point, another risk point, but it's the same as any technology. You have to have the governance, the control, the auditability, the observability around it to give the best protection you can and make sure that the LLMs are trained as effectively as possible.
Tim, let me just add something really briefly as well, which is that, we definitely can prevent contamination by strictly controlling what the AI can see, what it can learn from, and what it can act on. So we only give it clean, approved enterprise data. We don't give free access to the internet. So AI can't be contaminated by data it never sees, which is some of what we're thinking about as well.
That's a great point, Michael. Thank you. I think it's a really, really great point.
Great. Well, we've got time for just 1 minute here. And that is there different appetites for agentic AI in different regions? I know, Tim, you mentioned a bit previously that perhaps it's a bit different here than maybe over the pond, but who could just take this last quick one for 1 minute?
I can go
perhaps
for
Tim. Yeah, thank you, Tim. Yeah.
So I've worked across most parts of the world, and any technology adoption is faster in some places than others. There's a conversation about the EU over-regulating, but equally I've seen very, very progressive companies in Europe adopting AI. So yes, there's always going to be a regional difference in adoption, but to try and summarize it in 10 seconds will be tough.
Thank you. Well, I'm assuming that no one has any other points to add there, so I am going to say thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me and, of course, sharing your insights with everyone watching today. And for those who have watched and contributed, thank you so much. And I hope you've enjoyed the session. And just a reminder that this recording will be available to watch back if you wish at a later date, because I know it's hard to always follow exactly what's going on in the moment. And also, I'm sure, I haven't actually asked the panel this, but I'm sure our speakers would be happy to answer if you have any more questions, if you want to reach out to them via LinkedIn or email. And just a reminder, we at FinTech Futures are often bringing out webinars and events, so keep a lookout for those on our different social media platforms. But anyway, as I'm running out of time, once again, thank you everyone for attending today, and see you all very soon.